I finally understood that a depleted woman cannot pour from an empty cup. Hola! Welcome to Sana podcast. I'm your host, Eileen Lopez-Tomé. I'm a first-generation Cuban American woman, breast cancer survivor, and mother of 5. I'm also a certified professional coach. Sana is dedicated to you, Hispanic and Latina breast cancer survivors who've always been the strong ones and now feel lost in their identity after cancer diagnosis. Every week, I'll be sharing the foundation of my ecosystem of healing coaching process, which I use to help my clients restore trust in their bodies, release perfectionism, advocate for themselves, and live from a place of healing and peace rather than survival. Tune in to hear my real life experiences, carving a new path for myself after remission, but helping my coaching clients carve a new path for themselves too. Hello, sister survivors. Welcome to episode 8 of Sana. Today is June 7th, 2026, and it's National Cancer Survivors Day, their 39th annual celebration of life. And National Cancer Survivors Day, or NCSD, because that's a mouthful, is an annual celebration that's dedicated to honoring cancer survivors, inspiring those that are recently diagnosed, supporting families, and raising awareness of the ongoing challenges that survivors face. Who is a cancer survivor? Well, since today is NCSD, I looked at how their website defines a cancer survivor, and it's anyone with a history of cancer from the moment of diagnosis through the remainder of life. That means you, and that means me. Today, communities all around the world are hosting events, and we're celebrating right here together on Sana. In episode 7, I shared that I graduated as a cancer patient on May 13th. No more 6-month appointments, no more blood work every 6 months, and no more worrying about the results. And I think I told you that I just went about my business that day, probably in a little bit of a daze, if I'm going to be perfectly honest, not fully processing what it meant when the oncologist said to me, "Are you ready to graduate as a cancer patient?" And I jumped all over that opportunity and said yes. But I think that day I just went back to work, back to making sure that everyone had everything they needed, including dinner that night. You know, typical first-gen eldest daughter Latina strong woman thing to do. No big deal. Thank you, next. I'm a cancer graduate. That's all. But today, on this really important day, on National Cancer Survivors Day, I'm letting it be a big deal, because it is. So thank you for being here with me a few days later, listening to this episode and joining me in the celebration. Making this episode is a gift of survivorship for me, and I hope that sharing it with you, you receive it as a gift and that it's a gift for you too. I want to say that survivorship isn't just about being alive after cancer. It's about figuring out what living fully actually means for you. Now, after diagnosis, during diagnosis and treatment, and after everything is over. And for many Latina survivors especially, that question gets complicated by barriers that don't get talked about enough. There are awareness gaps, cultural stigma, access to care or lack of access to care, lack of culturally appropriate support. So today, with that in mind, we're going to talk about 3 pillars of self-care that have supported me my whole life, even from before cancer, through treatment and into survivorship. And I'm going to make the case that survivorship is not just something that happens to you, it's something that you get to define. If you're a survivor who's ready to start defining what fully living looks like for you, that's exactly the work that I do. Book a free discovery call with me at paperbell.me/Eileen Lopez-Tomé. The link is in the show notes. So let's talk about the landscape of survivorship and the particular challenges that Latina survivors face. According to the NSCD site and to the American Cancer Society, as of 2026, approximately 18.6 million Americans are living as cancer survivors. And that number is expected to climb to 22.4 million over the next decade. That means that 1 in 3 people in the US will receive a cancer diagnosis in their lifetime. And of the 18.6 million cancer survivors in this country, more than 4.3 million are women with a history of breast cancer. That's nearly 1 in 4 of every cancer survivor in America. And that number is unfortunately expected to reach above 5 million by 2035. And there's a particular landscape for Latina survivors, the thing that most cancer awareness conversations miss. Latina breast cancer survivors experience worse post-treatment quality of life than their white counterparts. More pain, fatigue, depression, and body image distress. And they're less likely to receive guideline-adherent treatment and follow-up care. Barriers include cost, lack of insurance coverage, language barriers, limited access to culturally appropriate psychosocial support, and a shortage of survivorship resources designed with Latina women in mind. Okay, great. So what do we do with a bunch of statistics? Well, let me name what this means to me personally, not as a statistic, but as a woman. First, this is part of why Sana Sana exists. The gap between surviving and thriving is real. I felt it. And for Latina survivors, it's wider and less supported than it should be. When I was diagnosed and through most of my survivorship, I didn't find a podcast, a coach, a community that understood both the cancer experience and the cultural experience of being a Latina navigating it. So I'm building on. And let's stop here real quick and take a brief journal break and jot this question down for journaling later. What resource did you wish you had when you were diagnosed that you couldn't find? What would have made those first days feel less alone for you? And if you're willing to share, I'd really love to hear your answers over on my Instagram, Eileen Lopez Tomei Coach. What resources did you wish you had? What resources were missing? Whether they were medical resources or culturally appropriate support. An example I have from my survivorship, and I don't want you to think that I didn't have any resources. I went to a wonderful cancer center that had a really great survivorship program. One of the things that they offered were breast cancer support groups. This was pre-pandemic, so the support groups were mostly, if not all, in person. And I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was about going to a support group that no me llamaba la atención, didn't catch my attention. And I realized after a few years that it just felt weird to be going to a group of strangers and being vulnerable and sharing my private thoughts and feelings about what I was going through, even though that's something that people do all the time. But probably because of how I was raised, that, you keep your private business private. And we've talked about this in past podcast episodes, where you worry a little bit too much about what other people might think. The breast cancer support group just didn't call to me. So let's dive in now into the 3 pillars of self-care that have always been mine. And going back to that NCSD website, it suggests that survivors practice self-care that rejuvenates mind, body, and spirit. And my 3 pillars map pretty perfectly to that, I found. My first pillar is the rosary, which has to do with spirit. My second pillar is movement, which has to do with body. And my third pillar is weight training, which invokes strength. And this isn't a wellness checklist, so let me see if I can convey to you how important these 3 pillars have been to me my whole life, and not just through my cancer journey, but especially during my cancer journey. So before I say more about my 3 pillars, I want to name something, acknowledge something that I just alluded to when I talked about the breast cancer support groups, which is a cultural component. So if you grew up the way I did, in a Hispanic / Latina / Cuban home, for me it was Cuban, especially as the eldest daughter, you were raised to take care of everyone else first, everything and everyone else first. So that phrase of self-care might land a little sideways for you. It did for me, because in our culture, self-care often translates to selfish. The women who raised us didn't model it. They modeled sacrifice, and they modeled it with love. I'm not here to tell you they were wrong or what they did was wrong. What I am here to tell you, though, is that cancer made me learn a different approach, a different language, a different behavior. And the language was that of my own body, my own needs, my own limits. Not because I stopped caring about my family or about work or my community, but because I finally understood that a depleted woman cannot pour from an empty cup. And that my family deserved the real me, not the performance of me. So when I use the term self-care today, I don't mean spa days. I mean the very real, non-luxury related practices that have kept me alive, spiritually, mentally, physically, for my whole life. So let's talk about pillar number 1. It's my first and oldest pillar because it's been with me since early childhood. And my mommy gave it to me. And it's her greatest gift and legacy to me, which is praying the rosary. For my listeners who may not be Catholic, the rosary is a meditative Catholic prayer practice. So there are a set of prayer beads, generally the kind that you carry around or that you might see people praying, have 5 sections of 10 beads in each section, with a big bead separating each of those 5 sections. There's a crucifix or cross usually hanging at the end of the circle, with a large bead, 3 smaller beads, and then another large bead. More than you ever wanted to know about the rosary, but we're free to ask. But each set of beads on the rosary corresponds to a mystery. And it's a meditation on a moment in the life of Jesus and Mary. And praying it is not just mindless recitation. It is a contemplative practice. Each prayer is an anchor, and each mystery is an invitation to be present in your life and in the life of Jesus and Mary. And my mom taught me to pray the rosary when I was a very young girl. She also taught me to pray the Litany of Loretto, which is my favorite litany. We prayed that at the end of every rosary. And we prayed that litany and the rosary every night growing up. And later, whenever we were anxious or worried about something, we would pray the rosary together, even when I was older. When I was in my early 20s, for example, I was newly married with 2 babies and navigating law school and so much stress. I would sometimes come home late at night from the law library and find my mom sitting up in the kitchen waiting for me, praying her rosary. We would then either pray together, or she'd put her rosary away and I'd translate my notes into Spanish for her from the various classes that I took that day at law school. And sometimes we'd do both. So for me, praying the rosary slows my racing mind. It brings me to the present moment. Before I even knew the term ADD or what it meant or how it applied to me, it was a prayer practice that I reached for over and over to still my thoughts, to calm my dysregulated nervous system, to yank me back from worries about the future or rumination about past events. And praying the rosary reminds me that I'm not alone, that God is preoccupied with my physical and my spiritual health and well-being. And it connects me to a heavenly mother who cares for me, just like she cared for her son. And I felt all of this when I was diagnosed throughout treatment, and I still feel it today whenever I pray the rosary. God's real presence, that I am accompanied by my Heavenly Mother, and that it anchors me to my faith and calms and comforts me. So in episode 2 of Sana Sana, I told you about my abuela's rosary and how it traveled with me to every chemo appointment. I had one, to my surgery, and all 20 radiation treatments. And that when I held it, I was not only praying, but was also invoking my grandmother and her faith and her resilience and her wicked sense of humor and her strength. So the rosary for me is a powerful prayer practice, and it also brings me into communion with the women of faith, with women cancer survivors who came before me in my lineage. And I want to stop here and give you another journal prompt. What is your rosary? Not necessarily the prayer, but what is your practice that slows you down, brings you back to yourself, and reminds you that you're not alone, that you're held? What is that practice that has been with you the longest?
Hey, I'm Will Holscher, a certified personal trainer, nutrition coach, and founder of Holscher Fit. I work with busy parents and professionals who are ready to stop sitting out their own story and finally build strength that actually fits their life. Not just to look better, but to have the energy to play with your kids, keep up with your life, and stay capable for decades to come. I offer in-person one-on-one training in South Florida, as well as online coaching. So wherever you are, if you're ready to stop starting over and build something that actually lasts, find me on Instagram at @HolscherFit, that's HOELSCHERFIT, and send me a DM. I'd love to help.
And now let's move on to pillar 2, which is moving my body. Moving my body is another lifelong pillar. It encompasses the story of a feral, sports-loving girl that I gave you a peek of in episode 7, in the last episode. So this is also not a pillar of self-care that cancer introduced. It has always been and still is mine. And during cancer, I leaned on it for my physical health and to help me stay sane. And let me tell you the story of sporty girl Eileen, the early years. I was very active and always looking for as much physical movement as possible. I have early memories of being 7 years old and telling my mom that I was going for a bike ride around the block, and then taking off on my bike and going for miles, feeling free, and sometimes stopping at the arcade on Collins Avenue and 71st Street on Miami Beach. And as a 7-year-old going in there and watching people play arcade games. Another way that I was active and moved my body when I was younger is I played softball at the Optimist Club, the community park close to home, also in Miami Beach where I grew up, starting like in the 4th or 5th grade and through junior high. I played volleyball for my Catholic school in 7th and 8th grade. I was a cheerleader, I think in 7th and 8th grade as well. I went roller skating at the local park in my tweens and teens, like most tweens and teens did in those days. We'd take over the basketball courts and someone would bring a boombox and play music that we skated to. And don't worry, my parents were always close by, chaperoning. Que pena. When I was 15 years old, I took a jazzercise class at a community center close to home. Yes, me and my closest 40 to 50-year-old neighbors were in this class together, and I loved it. I have always been a viejita at heart and like a fitness class girly. Anyway, I was really good at it, and the instructor asked me if I wanted to learn how to teach jazzercise and become an instructor like her. And I wanted to do it very much, but my parents said no because they were afraid I'd run away with the jazzercise circus, I guess. But anyway, as you can tell, I was in constant physical movement from a very young age. And I wonder, as I'm telling you my story, what did it feel like to be in your body before cancer, when you were younger? before anyone told you that your body should look a certain way or what your body was for? What did movement give you that nothing else did? Take a minute to jot that question down and journal about it later. So I think I've covered my childhood, my early childhood, tweens, teens, 15, 16. At the age of 18, I got my first gym membership and I lifted weights for the first time. And that became my favorite way of getting in shape. And I used air quotes for the getting in shape part because this was probably the first time I started thinking of exercise as a way to make my body conform to a certain standard, to look a certain way, as opposed to just for the joy of it or for how it made me feel. But that's not a topic for this episode. We'll touch on that in a future topic, I'm sure. Body image, and not just body image after cancer, but if you go into cancer with a certain body image, how that impacts treatment and recovery. In this episode, I want to talk about the 3 pillars of self-care, my 3 pillars of self-care. And we were talking about moving your body and weightlifting. And the first time I lifted weights and how much I loved it. And it's because weightlifting gave me strength, confidence, a feeling of ownership over my body. I felt invincible and loved to see my growing muscles. I was not one of those girls that worried about bulking up. And that feeling never left me, thankfully, and I easily tapped it when I needed it most after my diagnosis. Another type of movement I found as an adult was running. Starting in law school, a group of classmates and I would run at the end of a long day of classes and before a long afternoon, evening, and night of marathon studying and outlining cases for class discussion. And I was pregnant with my second child in law school and ran through my 7th month of pregnancy. I loved it so much, and it helped me to relieve stress and prepared me to focus on studying and all of the reading that's required in law school. So movement brought me and brings me stress relief, clarity, focus. I think I've already said several times, calm, and is something that has always been mine, a constant in my life, even when things felt out of control. And remember in episode 6 when I told you about how 3 weeks after my last chemo round and 3 days before my bilateral mastectomy, I finished the Miami Half Marathon, and how I did it in the rain. I was bald under my running beanie thanks to chemo. I had no eyebrows, no eyelashes, and I mostly walked it with my friend who flew in from DC and my coworkers who are like family, and they cheered me on and helped me keep going when I wanted to quit. And I think I mentioned this in that episode. That wasn't about fitness for me. It was about reclaiming agency over my body, which in the moment was self-care. And if you heard that episode or you knew me when I had cancer, you know this story about the Miami Half Marathon. And I'm telling it again today, or I brought it into this episode because I feel like it belongs here on National Cancer Survivors Day as evidence of what the body can do and endure. Okay, Eileen, you're asking yourself, but how is weightlifting, running, going to the gym, walking, dancing during and after cancer self-care? Well, I'm glad you asked, and I'm ready for that question. I found some research, first from the MD Anderson Cancer Center, that exercise during cancer treatment benefits patients that are in active treatment, that improves the quality of life, it reduces fatigue, it improves mood, and potentially makes chemotherapy more effective by reducing inflammation and improving immune function. And the American Cancer Society's website says that exercise is safe and helpful before, during, and after cancer treatment for most people. Even a short, slow walk counts. And I have to say that reminds me of my dad when he was undergoing lung cancer treatment. You know, he would take himself on walks, and short, sometimes very short walks, sometimes just to the end of from the front door to the end of the walkway on the front yard and back. But I remember it giving him hope and, if not physical strength, helping him to feel better after treatment or when he was getting ready for another round of treatment. So the most important thing really is to move as much as you can and as you want to. And I want to add a disclaimer here that whether as a cancer patient in treatment or as a post-treatment survivor, and really whenever you undertake any physical activity, especially if you're doing it for the first time, check with your doctor first. I always checked with my oncologist before I did anything, and with my breast surgeon, and they both cheered me on, gave me the green light. And my breast surgeon, I remember, even sent me a beautiful note after the Miami half congratulating me and encouraging me. I also want to acknowledge the nuance here. I am not recommending any of my sister survivors to go out and complete a half marathon or go to the gym and lift heavy weights or any weights for that matter. That was what I decided for me as a way to reclaim a body that had been battered by cancer and treatment and was about to undergo invasive surgery. What I'm recommending is that you find your version of movement, whatever your body can do, whatever you want to do that brings you back to yourself. A walk around the block, stretching in the morning, dancing in your kitchen, lifting light weights, using stretchy bands while you're seated. Whatever your version is, I encourage you to do that. I want you to ask yourself, when did you last move your body because it felt good? Just for that reason. Not to lose weight, not to get fit, not to look a certain way, just because it felt good in your body to do it. That's the question. Find your way back to that. All right. Ready for pillar 3? My last pillar of self-care. This is another pillar that I turn to over and over. The one I return to when I need to feel strong in my body. And not just strong in my body, but also mentally strong. And that's weightlifting. I already mentioned it in pillar 2 is one of the many ways that I move my body or have moved my body that helped me to come back into my body. And I immediately loved weightlifting, even though I hated the weight room in standard gyms for years. What I love, though, is not the aesthetics, but the feeling that I get from weightlifting. That feeling of being strong, confident, like I said, in my body, like I could do anything. And why is weightlifting specifically self-care and not vanity? And why does that distinction matter for survivors? When cancer treatment takes so much from your body, your hair, your breasts, your energy, your sense of control, your sense of physical normalcy, your sense of calm, lifting weights is an act of reclamation. It says, my body can still build, lift, hold on to something. It can still become stronger. It is still mine. And guess what? I know I'm throwing a lot of research at you in this episode, but the research supports that strength training specifically for cancer survivors reduces bone loss from hormonal therapies and radiation, improves balance and mobility, decreases depression and anxiety, and has been linked to reduction in cancer recurrence and improvements in overall survival. And where am I with weightlifting in this season of my life? Like I said at the beginning of this pillar, it's something that I go back to over and over, which should imply to you that I'm sometimes am away from it. And I have been away from the gym and from my personal trainer, William, who also happens to be my eldest son, for over a year now, and I've missed it. I had made great progress before that for 3 years. I trained 3 days a week with my son, and for a variety of reasons, I stopped weightlifting for, like I said, a little over a year. And just a couple of weeks ago, I called my son and I said, I'm ready to go back. It's time. And I went back to the gym last week, and I knew I had missed it, but I didn't realize just how much until I got back and picked up a dumbbell and sat at a machine and met my son there. And yeah, it's frustrating because I feel like I'm starting from zero after a year away, but it's okay. This isn't a before and after for me. This is a continuing relationship with physical exercise and strength training, and I'm thankful to have restarted and to be back training with my son and at a personal training gym. While I step away from formal physical movement sometimes, I always find my way back. It reminds me of who I am at my core, a strong mother of 5 who had to learn how to ask for and receive help after a cancer diagnosis left me no choice. And that brings me to the end of my 3 pillars and to a question for you. What are your 3 pillars? They don't have to be the same as mine. They just have to be true to you. Take a moment right now. Think about what sustains your spirit, what honors your body, what builds your strength, your confidence. Write whatever comes to mind. And write how each supports your self-care. All right, I'm going to pause here for just a second, because if what we've been talking about is landing for you, I want you to know there's somewhere you can take it. If you're a cancer survivor who has always been the strong one, and you're quietly wondering who you are now that everything has changed, you don't have to figure that out alone. I'm Eileen Lopez-Tomei, cancer survivorship coach and fellow survivor, and my coaching practice exists for women exactly like you. If today's episode is resonating and you're ready to go deeper, book a free discovery call at paperbell.me/Eileen Lopez-Tomei. The link is in the show notes. Okay, now back to today, back to you, back to what it means to celebrate this life. I think I've said this before, survivorship is not a finish line. It is a practice. And here's what survivorship means for me. Beyond the National Cancer Survivor Day or medical definition, it's not just being alive after cancer. It is asking, what does living fully mean for me now, after everything I've been through? And there's no one answer to that question. And the answer changes as you age, as life changes, as you heal in new ways. My 3 pillars are evidence of that definition in action. Praying the rosary is tending my spirit, my faith, my connection to something bigger than me. Moving my body is honoring the body that carried me through treatment. Heck, that carried me through 5 pregnancies and 2 marriages and many other challenges in life, law school, undergraduate, yeah. And it's still carrying me through survivorship. Weightlifting is building strength, claiming ownership, refusing to let cancer have the last word about what my body can do. So today on National Cancer Survivors Day, I'm inviting you, Sana Sana listener, to identify your 3 pillars, yours, not mine, not anyone else's, but yours. What has always sustained you? What did you let go of during treatment that you want to reclaim? Or what new practice is calling to you now? Most of us Latinas were raised to take care of everyone else first, to stay small, to please others first. Self-care was not modeled as a priority. And if it was even a thing that was talked about, because I grew up in the 80s and I'm trying to think, did we talk about self-care? Well, if it was a thing that was even talked about, it was often framed as selfishness. So survivorship is an opportunity to ask ourselves how that model is working out for us. And if the answer is it's not working for me at all, then survivorship is the opportunity to unlearn it, to practice tending to ourselves, not as a reward for taking care of everyone else, or not after we get everything else done, but as a foundation, as a primary practice, everything that we do. And that's not a betrayal of the women who raised us. That is the gift we give them and our daughters by doing it differently. So happy National Cancer Survivors Day and month, because June is National Cancer Survivors Month, to those who celebrate. And for every survivor who has sat in a waiting room holding her mommy's or abuela's rosary, for every survivor who went back to the office and made dinner the day she got the best news of her life, the day she graduated as a cancer patient, for every Latina who navigated a diagnosis without a single resource that spoke her language, literal or cultural, for the woman who is newly diagnosed and terrified, and for the woman 10 years out who is still unpacking the terror. For our metastatic breast cancer survivor sisters who are pushing for a cure, may we push with them. And for me, who at 9 years and 9 months after diagnosis finally graduated as a cancer patient, who is still untangling the complexities of diagnosis, treatment, and survivorship, who wakes up grateful every day, grateful to still be around to watch my youngest grow into a teenager, grateful to become a grandmother, to travel with my husband and our friends, who finally established her coaching practice for cancer survivors after years of quiet planning and dreaming about it. Today, I am celebrating by recording this episode, by being visible, by saying out loud, I am a breast cancer survivor, and I am still becoming all that God created me to be. Sana, sana, colita de rana. Si no sanas hoy, sanarás mañana. To every survivor listening today, you made it today. We made it. That is worth celebrating. Every single day you get up is worth celebrating. Feliz National Cancer Survivors Day, hermana. Y sana, sana. If you're celebrating National Cancer Survivors Month, share this episode. Tag me. Let me celebrate with you. And if you're ready to start defining what fully living looks like for you, come find me. Book a free discovery call at paperbell.me/Eileen Lopez Tomei. I'd love to be part of your survivorship journey. See you next week. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Sana Sana, the show that helps you heal and restore the parts of your ecosystem that were depleted after a breast cancer diagnosis. If you liked the episode, please leave us a rating and review so we can reach more incredible survivors, como tú, who want to heal with us. If you want to stay connected with our growing community, check out our Instagram at Eileen Lopez Tomei Coach and share what part of the episode touched your heart today. See you next week.